There shall be no peace beyond my power. There shall be no enemy beyond my wrath." Thus spoke the all-powerful emperor atop Mount Vengeance on Terra. Then several of his most loyal servants came together, yearning to serve the emperor of mankind in the best way possible, to help him realize his dreams of conquering the galaxy and ruling over it. Skilled were they in stealth and deception, perfected in the art of assassination. They hunted those who wished to disrupt the divine plan of the emperor and struck them down like thunder from the heavens. They labored in secret, not seeking the praise of the emperor of mankind, for they considered themselves unworthy of his attention amidst the immeasurable sacrifices and destructions of the Great Crusade. Silently traversing from planet to planet in the footsteps of the emperor, they executed the traitors, ensuring that no one deviated from their promises, broke treaties and agreements. But over time, those loyal servants realized that they were not destined to hide from death forever, and therefore they must pass on their skills to their descendants, so that this grand labor might continue. They then revealed themselves to the Emperor of mankind, and he saw how heavy a burden of duty they had placed upon their own shoulders, and he was greatly pleased. Then majestic temples were erected on Terra, and they began to search for youths skilled in the craft of soul-taking. Thus arose the Officio Assassinorum, and the names Calidus, Venenum, Culexus, Vindicare, Eversor, and Venus eternally entered history. The strongest of the apprentices survived incredibly rigorous training and eventually passed their skills on to the next generation. New assassination techniques were studied and new temples were laid down. The mastery of the blade and pistol, poison and garrote was honed in all conceivable aspects. And now truly there shall be no peace beyond the power of the Emperor, and no enemy beyond his wrath. For the governance of an imperium that spans the entire galaxy, absolute power is required, which must be reinforced by absolute might. Sometimes it is applied in its most primitive form, throwing armies of warriors and war machines or fleets of spacecraft at the foe, but there are more elegant ways to achieve the desired outcome. Coercion, bribery, threats, blackmail and murder are all weapons in the armory of those whose iron grip defines the realms of man. To this end, the Imperium has developed several institutions to exploit these weapons to their fullest, ancient organizations that trace their history back to the Great Crusade and the very birth of the Imperium. One such organization is the Officio Assassinorum. Officio Assassinorum, or the Assassin Bureau, ranks among the most secret services of the Imperium. Its mysterious Grand Master is a member of the High Lords of Terra, a conclave of unimaginably powerful individuals, each of whose decisions affects the lives of billions of people and the state of affairs across the endless expanses of the galaxy. Only these rulers can sanction the dispatch of an agent on a mission, as they fear their weapon might be turned against them. There are reasons for this. Rumors have it that in the distant past, the great masters of the Officio Assassinorum used acolytes for personal purposes, eliminating other High Lords to increase their power, and even the Council of Terra bowed before their tyranny, founded on terror. In the insane days of the Wars of Vengeance, on the contrary, the master of the Officio himself fell at the hands of an assassin, and all the powerful and privileged layers of society lived in fear for their lives. Since then, the High Lords have been especially thorough in controlling the assassins, and therefore it is assumed today that only traitors and heretics should fear the shadows and darkness. A handful of individuals aware of the existence of the Officio Assassinorum regard it not only as an ideal instrument of destruction, but also of diplomacy. The Imperium spans an entire galaxy, and the inhabitants of many planets believe they can break free from the dominion of Terra. In a realm the size and scope of the Imperium, it is all too common for planets to escape the vigil of the High Lords. With communication and travel at the mercy of the warp's shifting tides, a populace can go for 10, 20, even 100 years without being contacted by the wider Imperium. It is a fragile system indeed, and given the crushing grind of imperial life, one that has seen many worlds fall into the thrall of heresy. Left to fend for themselves against a hostile galaxy, it is easy for a planet's citizenry to harbour the seeds of corruption. A world may fail to pay its tithes, allow its psycho-containment routines to slip, or come under the rule of an unsanctioned government. Some simply crave independence away from the dictates of the administratum, the ecclesiarchy, and a galaxy ruled by 12 faceless figures in the name of a distant emperor. Others fall under the influence of gin-stealers or succumb to the temptations of chaos. Regardless of whether the new order is benevolent or tyrannical, its orchestrators make themselves targets for the most violent of retributions. Though their government may thrive in the short term, word will eventually reach the adepts of the Imperium of their disobedience. Sometimes the resultant confrontation leads to open war, but it is just as often resolved by covert means. This is the battlefield of the assassins. For the greater good of humanity, they exterminate the misguided and the vain, the reckless and the corrupt. It is unacceptable for heretics to stand against the Imperium. Otherwise, their harmful ideas will spread across the cosmos like rot, undermining an already extremely fragile framework of human dominion. Every planetary governor must understand that abuse of power may bring retribution upon them. To some, evading the law-keepers of the Adeptus Arbites is possible. Very few can stand against the Imperial Guard and the Space Marines. But let it be known that no one escapes the punishment of the Officio Assassinorum. The assassins of the Imperium are able to change the fate of worlds with the pull of a single trigger. Where the length of the Emperor's reach needs to be made abundantly clear, a Vindicar sniper will put a bullet in the target's head whilst the errant individual is surrounded by his followers. If the traitorous creed has spread to an entire organization or military force, an Eversaw will instead be set loose, a bio-enhanced berserker that will slaughter dozens, if not hundreds of rebels alongside the key individual he has been sent to slay. Should the deed require more subtlety, an operative from the Calidus Temple will instead be dispatched. In such cases, it is all but impossible to detect the presence of these shape-shifting assassins until the deed is done. If the target is a psyker, one of the rare and fearsome Culexus will be sent to hunt them down. Beings with a strange void in place of a soul that makes them the bane of all who treat with the warp. The weapons of the assassins range from simple knives and garrots to exotic neural shredders and phase swords that can cut through armor and force field alike. Even bare-handed, these operatives are lethal foes. Each is trained extensively in unarmed combat and is more than capable of fighting their way free from the mayhem that ensues from their kill. Returning to their masters, they are extensively debriefed and examined before being given a new mark and mission to accomplish. In this way, each assassin is locked into a constant cycle of headhunting that spans the breadth of the Imperium, reforging the fragile chains of Imperial rule, even as the time of ending breaks them apart. The training of an assassin is a long and arduous business. Almost every recruit is an orphan, taken from the wreckage of his or her former life among the population of a death world, feral society or hive city, and transported to the Schola Progenium for tutelage. There they train alongside the youths who will become the foremost agents of the Imperium. Life in the Scholas is extremely hard, a relentless grind of physical and mental challenge where only the strongest thrive. Taught to strive for excellence and obedience in all things, the minds and bodies of the recruits are sharpened to a killing edge, whilst their spirit learns to embrace the Emperor as master and immortal father. Most of these intense young men and women go on to train as Militarum Tempestus Scions, commissars, or, in the most unusual cases, inquisitors. Those of their number who are born killers, however, are instead appropriated by the shadowy figures that haunt each selection day. Those recruits are never seen again by their fellows. From that day onwards, their only true friend is death itself. Training starts even as the Assassinorum ships return to Terra, with the Officio instructors testing their prospective pupils mercilessly. The recruits must survive on limited food or air for days at a time. They must constantly fight each other in armed and unarmed combat, in conditions of total darkness or blinding light, zero-G or crushing weight, stifling heat or freezing cold. By the time of their arrival, there may be only a tenth of the prospective assassins left, or sometimes, if the instructors deem every recruit to be unworthy, none at all. Upon arrival at Terra, the surviving initiates begin the next stage of their training. Sailing past the spaceborne basilicas, immense queues of pilgrim craft and military cordons that congest Terra's outer orbit. They are carried down into the Assassinorum temples under the most advanced of shrouding protocols. In subterranean safe houses, these new recruits are divided amongst the hidden temples of the Officio Assassinorum. Each temple has its own ancient ways and mysteries, and each specializes in a different aspect of the art of murder. There are many such temples, some of which are known to the others, and some that remain completely secret. Thus, the existence of the Culexus Temple with its terrifying anti-psyker assassins is an example of a carefully guarded secret. There, the initiates train for a full decade, laboring under the auspices of Lord Assassins, so harsh they make the drill abbots of the Schola Progenium look like kindly uncles by comparison. The training procedure becomes ever more rigorous over the years, as the temples test each candidate to his or her utmost limits. Days are spent battling with bone-wrenching exercise engines, fighting in deadly bouts or mastering their tolerance for pain. Initiates must survive lengthy courses of psycho-indoctrination and aggressive hypnosis, undergo physical tests of ever-escalating severity, and digest vast quantities of information about the Imperium that will soon be their hunting ground. They must train in the most esoteric of weaponry and steel their bodies against the ravages of endless steroids and stims. Even then, they have only scratched the surface of their temple's potential arsenal. The hidden orders of the Assassinorum conceal masterpieces of destruction, some of which were devised by the Primarchs, Malcador, the Sigillite, and even the Emperor himself. Truly it is said that each temple houses 1,000 deaths and more. Thus, when the High Lords of Terra choose living weapons from the ranks of trained apprentices of the secret Assassinorum agency, they are guaranteed to receive the most effective and perfectly calibrated instrument of death. Most of the time, assassins operate alone. Occasionally, however, a whole team of assassins is sent on a mission. They can fight alongside other armed forces of the Imperium, but are not always only on the side of Allied troops. History knows many examples when it was necessary to aid one of the enemy factions for the greater good of humanity. For instance, there can be situations where two orc warbands fight each other for control over a planet located near Imperial territories. The victor will then unite the survivors and most likely wage war against the human state. In this case, it would be wise to send a few secret agents to help the weaker opponent, which will ultimately result in a double benefit. First, the conflict will continue for a longer period, and as a result, more orcs will die. Second, the rising green-skinned despot will probably have to spend additional time consolidating power on the planet, fighting contenders for his position, and so on. Imperial agents can even switch sides in the conflict to ensure that neither enemy achieves a crushing victory. Thus, a potentially possible invasion can be indefinitely postponed. Imperial assassins are trained in the secret temples of the Officio Assassinorum, each teaching the art of death in different ways, instructing the use of specialized equipment and carrying out missions based on their unique methodologies. Nonetheless, all assassins have common features. They wear a protective covering known as sin skin, a sprayed-on synthetic layer that is air and water resistant and consequently protects against most types of irritant gases. In addition, it supplies the body with neutralizing agents, making the operative completely impervious to certain types of poisons and toxins. The already heightened reflexes of Imperial assassins are further enhanced by the same chemical substances entering the bloodstream from the synth fabric, allowing for even quicker reactions to emerging threats and dodging at the right moment. Furthermore, Imperial assassins have highly complex bioimplants, allowing them to see in darkness and dense smoke. Unlike other warriors of the Imperium, who are able to focus on war and war alone, the assassin must be truly autonomous. Once an operative is in the field, he must be able to cross the galaxy from one side to the other by means fair or foul. He must not only master his own lethal calling, but also be proficient in a dozen others. He must know how to drive and sanctify everything from an armored bike to a small spacecraft, must be able to convince truculent machine spirits to do his bidding and clean, disassemble, and reconsecrate his war gear whenever necessary. He must have a professorial knowledge of the Imperium's history, organization, and common languages. His understanding of human anatomy must be complete, and every fact the Imperium has uncovered about the physicality of the Xenos is bequeathed to him under oaths of secrecy. Few human minds can process such vast quantities of information, let alone master them. Not all survive the rigors of their training with their spirits intact, and many have fallen into madness at the sheer quantity of the trials they face. Yet an initiate that joins the ranks of his temple's operatives will have all these skills at his command. Key to the uncanny might of the assassin is the surgery he must undergo during his 10 years of tutelage. Augmentative nodes are stitched into his brain, and submuscular acoustic surgery prepares his body for the punishment that will be visited upon him in the line of duty. The level of arcane technology necessary is perhaps the most advanced the Imperium can provide. For good reason, it is constrained to holy terror to minimize the chance of it being captured by the enemies of humanity. It is well that such ancient techno-magics are revered so, and maintained with such painstaking care. Without them, the polymorphic drugs and reality-shifting devices used by the more esoteric temples would literally tear their operatives apart. Even if an assassin survives his training, his leash is still held suffocatingly tight. Only by a successful petition to the High Lords of Terror themselves and a 2/3 majority in the subsequent vote can an assassin be sanctioned and released into the galaxy to complete the task he was born to do. The fact that the ultimate luminaries of the Imperium give their direct attention to the deployment of a single individual shows just how exceptional these killers are. The records of the Officio temples are as detailed as they are scrupulous, a source of great pride to the masters that watch over them. Across the millennia, occasions where the dispatch of an operative has not resulted in the desired result are extraordinarily few and far between. Be the target man, witch, beast or demon, the result is the same, for an Imperial assassin is death incarnate. There exist 2 major temples within the Officio Assassinorum, specializing in assassinations without leaving a single trace. Thus, the operatives of Venus eliminate their targets by relying on their phenomenal talents in information manipulation. Venom agents, surpassed only by the inhabitants of the dark city of Comora in their knowledge of poisons, administer their prey with slow-acting toxins and disappear long before any suspicion can arise. Echo Malensis, the current Lord Assassin of this department, has honed her skills in the use of psychotoxins to such an extent that her targets died the same second the woman entered the temple hall for the mission debriefing. Perhaps both organizations do not possess such a record of service as Vindicar, Kaleidos, Eversor or Colexus, but they are just as merciless in their service to the cause of the Imperium. The Venenum Temple also boasts the best ratio of losses to achievements. Since the creation of Venenum, only a handful of its operatives have perished. It's not surprising, as agents usually disappear long before the effects of their impeccably measured toxins begin to manifest. The assassins of Venus wage a far more complex war, elevating the art of covert assassination to new levels. Their modus operandi involves gathering all possible information not only about the target, but also about their immediate surroundings, then covertly directing events in such a way that the target dies due to their own oversight. The best scenario is when a once loyal friend or comrade does the deed. The Imperium resorts to the services of Venus if the damage from revealing information about a high-profile individual falling into heresy exceeds the benefits of news that they faced retribution. Many revered saints or celebrated leaders have embraced untimely martyrdom upon their secret heresy being discovered by assassins. For instance, it was Sire Augustus Gula's consort commander, Evanduela, who buried her husband alive whilst he was sleeping in his bed. Operatives from the Venus Temple supplied her with information about her husband's imprudent contacts with a rival knightly house, and the finishing touch was delivered by the battle cannons of her allies among the Free Blades. Rumours speak of another temple secretum, named so because its agents do not adhere to a specific method of assassination, but rather strive to protect the Imperium's darkest secrets by any means necessary. The agents of the Officio Assassinorum are a deadly scalpel deployed when the sledgehammer of the Imperium's armies is too blunt and unsubtle a weapon. These masters of the art of death are perhaps the most proficient in the entire human race. Unleashed only on the direct sanction of the High Lords of Terror themselves, their influence extends from the coldest reaches of the Halo Zone to the dark heart of the Eye of Terror. Yet there have been those times in history when even the assignment of an Imperial assassin was deemed inadequate for the kill in question. At such times the High Lords have ordered the dispatch of an execution force, a number of assassins working in concert. Where a single operative may find his skills wanting in the final reckoning, the combined lethal repertoires of the major temples will be more than sufficient to exterminate the foe. It's hard to imagine the threat the Imperium must face for the High Lords to order the creation of such a squad, as every operative is a scarce and invaluable resource. Each year the temples recruit only a handful of apprentices, so that to send forth an execution force is to deploy such a precise and specialist weapon that their replacement, should they be lost, would take decades. As a result, these forces are assembled only rarely, and only when the future of an entire sector or even the Imperium itself hangs in the balance. The assassins of this formation are akin to death incarnate. They are one of the mightiest instruments of the Imperium. The effects of their deployment are comparable to an attack by a legion of Titans or the apocalyptic terror of an exterminatus. No enemy can stand against such assassins, neither in the winding corridors of an impregnable fortress, nor in the man-made hell of a battlefield covered in smoke and wrapped in flames. If the foes are not torn to pieces by a frenzied Eversaw, they will inevitably be drained by the soul-chilling living nightmare of a Culexus. If the prey is not pierced by poisoned blades of a Culexus, they will certainly be shot on the spot by the keen-eyed Vindicare. No one has the right to interfere with a punitive squad executing an order. Entire armies have perished at the hands of these agents, attempting to obstruct their path to the prey. Sometimes punitive squads are formed from representatives of a single temple. Thus, for example, teams composed exclusively of Vindicar assassins sometimes combine firepower, which produces a terrifying effect. They sweep away not just individual combat units of the enemy, but whole armies. The presence of even one Culexus causes turmoil in the war. But when several nulls gather in one place, their negative energy merges, causing ripples and echoes in the immaterium that torment nearby psychers. Kaleidus assassins are true masters of weaving conspiracies, skillfully using their camouflage to sow discord within the enemy ranks. If several such operatives are sent on a mission and they combine efforts, the enemy suddenly discovers that they are receiving diametrically opposite instructions from their leadership. A team composed only of Eversaws conducts coordinated attacks and thus completely annihilates isolated targets in a series of devastating raids and ambushes. As a result, often the situation does not even escalate to a real battle. Probably the last time a punitive squad was deployed was for the elimination of the Chosen of Abaddon, 4 sworn enemies of the Imperium so mired in blasphemy and murder that an entire team of assassins was sent aboard the flagship Despoiler to eliminate them. At this point, the status of the operation is unknown, and the heads of the Assassins Department fear that the agents have perished on their mission and their targets are still alive. In the dim light of the room, a holoplate brightly illuminated, displaying the blurred images of targets his team was tasked to annihilate. The instructor paced the room, hands clasped behind his back, waiting for the ancient computer to decrypt a file. With a soft chime, the download completed. The instructor stopped and surveyed the assassins who had passed a rigorous selection process. The Chosen of Abaddon. These targets were classified as threat level Omega. The instructor noted with satisfaction the complete absence of fear in the eyes of the assembled agents. Each of them knew. Omega level means that few of them will return from the mission. On the screen appeared the figure of a giant in bloodied armor. His helmet was adorned with steel horns, and in his hand He held a curved, serrated sword. The primary target is an individual known as Devram Korda. We believe this is the same entity that was previously known as the Tyrant of Sarora. It is known that he has gathered the life force of the population of the planet's largest hive into a single vial. The properties of this elixir are unknown, but for some time after taking it, Korda becomes invulnerable in all respects. He conquered the entire system and ruled it with an iron fist. Rumors abound that he has obtained several more doses of elixir from the populations of other planets until, as we believe, rival warriors from the Emperor's Children Legion overthrew him. The image changed to another. It depicted a figure in power armor with writhing symbols. A shimmering cloak of feathers was thrown over its shoulders. A snarling golden mask concealed its face. "Sorcerer, Yegethmor the Deceiver," the instructor continued. "We believe he was the cause of the massacre in Corellus. Several years ago, the entire population of 6 worlds in this system, totaling over 6 billion people, ended their lives in a ritual suicide in one night. We think it was he who was behind the creation and spread of the end of the world cult, in hopes of harnessing and using the psychic power generated by such a large number of deaths. Intelligence reports that he is on one of Abaddon's battle barges, but not the same one as Zarafistan. Apparently they are vying for Abaddon's favor." The instructor paused, looking at the assassins through the holographic image of the sorcerer. "We assume that Yegethmor knows about your mission, but is unlikely to interfere, as he only benefits from the destruction of his competitors. However, this is only an assumption. Act as though his intervention is inevitable." The image on the holoplate changed again. Now in focus were 2 warriors. The first wore black helmets with bronze cuirass, and in one hand held a power halberd with a serrated blade. Every element of his armor was adorned with snarling demon skulls. The visor of his helmet was shaped like the muzzle of a bloodthirsty wolf, and from the forehead grew horns that seemed more a part of his skull than an ornament. A repulsively excluded creature accompanied the giant. Its bloated armor, like living flesh, covered open wounds and buboes from which vile slime flowed. It clenched a rusty sword, and where its face should be, yellowish pus continuously oozed. The usually calm instructor swallowed hard before continuing. "The identities of these individuals have not yet been established, although both have been seen many times in the vicinity of Cardia over the last 100 years. Sessions of astropathic psychometry have shown they attempted to travel to the depths of the Eye of Terror in search of the heart of chaos. What it is and whether it exists at all is unknown. Nonetheless, numerous divinations with the Imperial Tarot indicate that these 2 play a significant role in Abaddon's plans. These reasons are more than enough to designate them as targets slated for destruction." The holographic screen went dark, leaving only the instructor in the pale light. For the first time in many centuries, these traitors have gathered under the banners of their lord. And those looming omens that have been revealed to us should not be underestimated. Officio Assassinorum has trained you well. You are the finest and most experienced assassins in the entire Holy Terran Empire of the Emperor. I know you will not fail. You will find the full briefing text in the agitators of your cabins. Study it carefully. Exitus acta probata. The instructor advised his charges, knowing that he would never see any of them alive again. The era of apostasy raged for more than 2 centuries. In those times, the administratum and the religious order of the ecclesiarchy were tearing the Imperium apart from the inside. The culmination of this period was the bloody reign of Lord Gouge van Deer, who held both the position of Master of the Administratum and head of the Ministorum. He turned the lives of countless imperial citizens into a sheer nightmare. Those who stood against him were killed, and star systems that could not pay the exorbitant tithe were bombarded with virus bombs. He easily swayed the will-less bureaucrats to his side, and thanks to boundless charisma, sent the militant orders of the ecclesiarchy on bloody religious crusades, being the leader of the Emperor's Church. Fanatical soldiers subdued all those Van Dyer branded as heretics and blasphemers. Eventually, many organizations of the Imperium turned against the elderly Van Dyer, suffering from delusions of grandeur, which resulted in the wars of apostasy. 5 chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, along with the armed forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus, descended upon the imperial palace in an attempt to end Vandire's bloody rule. In the end, his personal guards, the daughters of the emperor, turned against him when they learned from the emperor of mankind himself that Vandire was destroying his state. Alicia Dominica, the leader of the daughters of the emperor, personally beheaded the former ruler with a power sword. After Vandire's death, Terra lay in ruins. Many fled in fear of the wrath of imperial retribution, while others remained in hope that the turmoil would bypass them, or that they would continue to serve their former master, spreading even more corruption throughout the Imperium. And it was in this troubled period that the Wars of Vengeance unfolded. Autopsy report date 0104-288-M36, subject classified. Henceforth subject Alpha Mortician. Genobiology by Genop. 2 punctured wounds, both 13 mm in diameter. On subject Alpha's body, entry wounds from a pistol are observed, fired from close range with low-velocity projectiles. The cerebral cortex and the heart muscle exhibit signs of severe internal damage, indicating the use of an explosive projectile and ruling out the use of stabbing or cutting tools. No exit wounds observed, no traces of bullets or their fragments in the body. The absence of burns or cauterized tissues rules out the impact of energy weapons. Also, the absence of post-mortem bruising rules out bullet extraction by third parties. I can find no precise explanations for this. My final conclusion is that subject Alpha died instantly from the cessation of brain cortex activity and heart stoppage, caused by severe trauma to both organs. A few months after the death of the treacherous Gouge Vandira and the end of the Wars of Apostasy, the halls of the imperial palace once again trembled with the rumble of full-scale battles. This time a much more sinister force was involved, the Officio Assassinorum. Despite the lack of orders from the High Lords, someone had sealed all the exits and entrances from the halls of the Emperor of Mankind. Many officials, caught in the trap, barricaded themselves in their quarters, from where they listened to the sounds of gunfire and devastating explosions that shook the palace. The culmination of this period of violence was the death of the Grand Master of the Assassins. I learned that on the same day this atrocious crime occurred, a package was delivered to the office of the Inquisition. Inside it was a ring with a seal and a document written by the hand of an unknown person. The ring bore the symbol of the Officio Assassinorum, and it was an exact replica of those worn by the Grand Master of the Assassins as a sign of their office. The enclosed document claimed that it was genuine, and that the one found on the finger of the recently deceased Grand Master was in fact a forgery. Immediately, the mausoleum where the body of the Grand Master lay was cordoned off with inquisitional tape, and we began to investigate this claim. If the document spoke the truth, then the ring on the finger of the deceased should have contained an info crystal instead of a ruby. And so it was, which led us to confusion about the identity of the deceased. If the person buried in the crypt was not the head of the assassins, then who was it? Who sent the package that led to this discovery, and where then is the real Grand Master? The info crystal contained codes to the Adeptus Administratum's vault, and its notaries numbered in the hundreds. In the vast underground chambers were hidden some of the most sinister secrets of the Imperium, and discovering even one of them could take years, if not decades, for a person. The key to accessing the Great Vault is one of the special archival servitors, linked with a memory sub-device that stores data about the location of most vaults. For security reasons, its databanks contain only the coordinates of the crypt, but no details about the information stored within. We requisitioned 3 archival servitors and placed a sensory beacon on each before entering the vault codes. 2 of the servitors malfunctioned. The first plotted a path through a gallery that no longer existed and fell from a 2-kilometer height, sustaining irreparable damage. After 2 weeks, one of them managed to discover the vault. The sensory beacon showed that the servitor had travelled approximately 50 kilometres in the depths of the Hive Tyrant. The entrance to the vault had collapsed, and the earthworks team had to clear the rubble. In case we were facing a trap ahead, we sent the next servitor to find out what was inside. There, we stumbled upon another lifeless body preserved under the protection of a stasis field. After conducting a genetic test, it was revealed that these were not the remains of the great Grand Master. Next to the corpse laid a document that, in my opinion, was penned by the true leader of the Officio Assassinorum. Faced with such staggering evidence, I find no reason to doubt the facts presented in the document that follows, which exposes widespread corruption within the Assassination Bureau. My verdict is as follows. The Officio Assassinorum is in dire need of reorganization, and like many departments of the Adeptus Administratum, it requires stricter control. This control must be exerted by the Inquisition, for which purpose we will establish a new department, the Ordo Sicarius. To avoid further complications, I recommend that these findings be kept confidential and that imperial records be edited to appear as follows. In the anarchic wars of vengeance, the Grand Master himself fell to an assassin's blade. Subsequently, the High Lords took special measures to manage the Officio Assassinorum, so that today, in theory, only traitors and heretics should fear it. For 80 years, I have led the Officio Assassinorum, and if this document falls into the hands of the Inquisition, it means I have managed to uncover an assassination attempt against me and the moral decay within the Officio. I can only hope that the reader of these lines will take appropriate measures to prevent further spread of corruption. Under the rule of Lord Vandir, I constantly obstructed this malevolent man from finding support within the assassination department. But as his grasp on the throat of the Imperium tightened, it became clear that Lord Vandir had somehow secured the support of Imperial assassins, as evidenced by several reports of high-ranking officials and dignitaries who were killed or went missing. Naturally, all the mentioned assassinations were executed flawlessly, and there were no obvious traces of Officio Assassinorum's involvement. However, anyone as familiar with the methodologies of the secret temples as I am could see sufficient clues. Furthermore, all the deaths seemed very beneficial for Lord Vandir. The unanswered question remained, who within the Officio was assisting him? Despite examining reports on disappearances and mysterious deaths, I was unable to determine the responsible temple. In some incidents, I suspect, members of my own Vindicare temple were involved, while in other cases the dreadful members of the Culexus temple were at work, and many poisonings could easily have been the handiwork of assassins from the Venenum temple. The list could go on, but pointing in any specific direction was not possible. This led to the first of my two conclusions. The Officio Assassinorum is rotten to the core due to Vandir's bribes and blackmail. However, this proved to be unlikely, as due to the veil of secrecy, even Lord Vandir might only know a few individuals within the Officio Assassinorum. The only possible answer lay within the Temple of Calidus, which was equipped with the ability to infiltrate other organizations of the Imperium, using polymorphine, a drug that allows one to take on the appearance of another person. Many planetary governors have fallen victim to the deception of the Calidus assassins, disguised as a beautiful courtesan or a modest servant. With such skills and mastery, members of the Calidus Temple can easily infiltrate even the Officio Assassinorum itself. The last fact which helped piece the picture together was the existence of a man named Ziz Jarek. As the senior executive of the Calidus Temple, he wielded significant influence within the Officio Assassinorum and was my main rival. He was called the next great Grand Master, but when the position became vacant, a turn of events prevented him from taking that post. At that very moment, Ziz Jarek was on a mission to infiltrate the mighty group of the Dark Elder. The alien and twisted psyche of these beings implies that only the most experienced Calidus assassins can attempt such a dangerous mission. Hence, Jarek personally led that operation. There was no news of him and his elite team of Calidus assassins for a year, and many thought that they had met with failure, possibly fatally. The same view was held by the High Lords of Terror when the previous Grand Master died of old age and his position was granted to me. When Jarek returned, having successfully completed the mission, he was shocked to find that the position which should have been his had gone to me. We were accepted into the Officio at the same age, and just like me, he understood well that he would now never become the Grand Master. By the time of my natural death and the vacancy of the position, he would be either too old or dead, unless I were to meet an untimely accident beforehand. As one of the High Lords of Terror responsible for appointing me to the position, Van Dyer also knew about this competition. Unable to secure support from the Officio Assassinorum through me, it was a sensible step on his part to use Yarek's hatred towards me to gain support from the Assassins Department. Believed with the virtues and resources of his temple, Yarek infiltrated several other assassin sanctuaries, after which he ordered the elimination of local high ranks to replace them with assassins of Calidus. Thus, corruption enveloped the Officio Assassinorum and spread like a malignant tumour. With the death of Lord Van Dyer, many departments of the Adeptus Administratum received instructions to purge their own ranks of persons suspected of collusion with the fallen ecclesiarch. Yarek knew that the Officio Assassinorum forgives nothing, allows no mistake, and tolerates no failures of any kind. The purges within the Officio Assassinorum would be utterly merciless. Anyone who even unintentionally participated in Lord Van Dyer's schemes would inevitably die. Accordingly, I understood that my own life was under threat. For in Yarek's place, my next move would have been to eliminate the Grand Master and reincarnate into him with the help of a polymorph. Therefore, I commenced to implement my own plan of action under extraordinary circumstances. In order to avoid the fate prepared for me by Yarek, I crafted a fake ring with a seal and placed a loyal Calidus assassin in my stead. Yarek's next move was exactly as I had predicted. One night, he and two other assassins infiltrated the Grand Master's quarters and eliminated my double. At that moment, I preferred to disappear. To those who ask why I did this, I will say that I realized how fragile a structure the Officio Assassinorum is. If it fell victim to the corruption of a few individuals, then the entire organization required restructuring. But first, it had to be completely destroyed, and I decided to bring the Officio Assassinorum to its knees. Only in that case did it have a chance to survive at all. Meanwhile, with a group of agents loyal to me, I declared a decisive war. Yarek might have been sitting in my office and wearing my ring with the seal, but I remained the Grand Master and the High Lord of Terror. Only I knew all the secrets of the Officio Assassinorum, including the activation codes of Vindicare assassins and information regarding the secret identities of each assassin. Moreover, no one but me had access to the secret arsenal of the Officio Assassinorum, where, among other things, some of the most powerful types of weapons in the entire empire were stored. Day and night, assassins loyal to me fought against the traitors. Eversor assassins crept through the corridors, holding in their subconscious information about the encoded identities of traitor assassins. Lying in ventilation shafts and hiding in the high alcoves of the Imperial Palace, my own Vindicares ambushed victims and eliminated them with impunity. They conducted hidden raids on the traitors' hideouts and blew them up. The explosions were so powerful that entire sections of the palace collapsed, and many unseen people perished. Many assassins loyal to me dared to turn to the Officio's secret arsenal, although some types of weapons were unstable or had extremely limited ammunition. But when you are fighting against enemies as deadly as you, and there are tools of destruction capable of killing at least one of them, then it's worth using them to tip the scales of balance in your favor. One by one we eliminated the assassins who had aided the Wanderer and Yarek, until finally only Yarek remained, and I did not engage in a duel with him in the chambers of the Grand Master. I had prepared for this moment from the beginning. I installed an electromagnetic charge in the desk and connected a voice sensor that would detonate it as soon as I uttered the code word. My ceremonial weapons, Exitus, rested on the wall, however. One of them was not just a model. The pistol was loaded and cocked. Yarek clearly expected me, and therefore he also prepared his battle gear. He smirked triumphantly, aware that even for a master of hand-to-hand combat such as myself, there were slim chances of standing against his Khatan phase sword and brain-scorching neural shredder. I uttered the code word, and the detonated grenade sent an electromagnetic pulse. Yarek looked at his weapon in horror, which had become useless as soon as it was deprived of energy. Seizing the moment of the enemy's hesitation, I dashed to the rack, grabbed the Exitus pistol and fired twice. By the time Yarrick had recovered from the shock, his attempts to evade were in vain. The tiny targeting computers inside each bullet were programmed to latch onto Yarrick's thermal trail and would follow him wherever he threw himself. The first hit him in the head and the second struck his chest. The special rounds, disintegrating under the action of microorganisms, ensured that the weapon which killed Yarrick would never be identified. I removed the magazine from the pistol and loaded it with standard rounds, then placed the Exitus back on the rack. With this final touch, I put an end to the decay within the Officio Assassinorum. However, I had to resort to radical measures, comparable to the amputation of a gangrenous limb. Now the Assassin's Bureau lies in ruins, and I entrust its reconstruction to the Inquisition. It cannot be said that I am without fault in what has transpired. I was quite foolish to believe that the Officio Assassinorum could stand on its own and not fall victim to such an odious character as Lord Van Dyer. I should have been more vigilant. Like a sniper waiting for their target, I should have spotted the seeds of corruption and removed them before they took root. For these reasons, I can no longer remain in the position of Grand Master for the good of the Imperium and the reform of the Officio Assassinorum. Since I myself am a relic of that old corrupt system, I cannot be part of the renewed agency. I can only hope that I have absolved my sins before the Emperor. Only he can be my judge and decide whether I am worthy of eternal rest. My most unpleasant and difficult duty was the creation of a secret order known as the Sicarian Order. It was established at my insistence after the investigation into the death of an alleged Grand Master of the Assassins during the conflict known as the War of Vengeance. The following changes were recommended to the organization of the Officio Assassinorum. The assassin temples are concentrated in various locations, so that if one is influenced by alien, demonic or heretic forces, the others would avoid the same fate. To sanction the elimination of anyone, 2/3 of the votes of the Senatorum Imperialis are required. A detailed report of all operations must be introduced and provided upon the first request of the Inquisition. All agents except those belonging to the Vindicare Temple are required to undergo regular psycho-conditioning, again under the supervision of the Inquisition if necessary. Within the Inquisition, I found a number of like-minded individuals and, together with them, established the Ordo Sicarius. We are to closely monitor the actions of the Officio Assassinorum and act according to circumstances. However, this mandate led to a crucial issue that we must resolve before we can continue our work. As one might expect, given the nature of their operations, the Officio Assassinorum is just as secretive an organization as our own Inquisition. But, as we were all taught, to truly investigate a suspicious organization, one must work from within, not from the outside. For this reason, we decided to infiltrate a certain number of our agents into each assassin temple. These inquisitors are engaged in exactly the same activities as the other assassins, but during the aforementioned psycho-indoctrination sessions, we will be able to extract any secret information, which the other assassins are not so willing to share. Thus, we have already prevented 2 attempts on the lives of the High Lords themselves, and also thwarted the assassination of one of our fellow inquisitors, who was covertly operating among the orcs in Saralam. The Emperor is well aware of the darkness that has settled in the human soul and which cannot be expelled, of the evil that must be eradicated before it emerges, for the very knowledge of it will poison the human race and ruin all its endeavors. Assassins protect the future of mankind by eliminating chosen targets tainted with the filth of betrayal, greed, demonhood, or other sins too horrific to name. Assassins are like a fine needle, burning to the heart of evil and piercing its rotten core. How many worlds risen at the instigation of a traitorous ruler is credited to each planet saved by the knife of an assassin? How many would fall under the influence of chaos and be doomed to eternal torments of the cursed, if not for a poisoned chalice or venomous dart? And how many worlds would burn in the cleansing fire of exterminatus? No one can answer these questions. Official records of the deeds of the secretive killers are not available, and thus it is impossible to accurately determine the number of planets saved from destruction by their selfless acts. but it can be said with certainty that billions of people owe them their lives. Officio Assassinorum operatives act silently and without thanks. They are the secret saviors of the Imperium, not afraid to stain their hands with blood. Do not ask whom they seek. Let their victims take care of that.